This is part 4 of What If Deku's Mom Died. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe for more fanfic videos. So, I will go first. Izuku looked up from his meal at the voice of Akamine, Rumi beside him, while the red-haired woman sat across from them. I will admit that what I suggested was insensitive. Rumi snorted at the word and ate her food with a petulant air about her, practically inhaling egged rice. However, I will also admit that it seems to be the best option. How is that the best? Rumi asked, her displeasure visible but not quite as volatile. You could just say that it's not true, but even if some believe you, some won't. This will make you lose a great deal of ratings as well as distrust forming. It's not true, though, Rumi grumbled, impaling an egg bite rather aggressively. We know that. The public does not. We could also try and play off that you're just friends, but then that will just lead to more questions. What if we said they're fake? Izuku proposed, Rumi pointing a chopstick at him as she nodded. I'm with the kid. Akamine rolled her eyes at the words as she adjusted her thin glasses. It's already been over a day since the paper was released. It will seem suspicious at best that we waited a day to say that the pictures are forgeries. As I said, it's the best option. And what exactly is that? Just walk around screaming that I'm dating someone that I'm not? Rumi snapped with a thin glare. Akamine sighed, taking a sip of a dark beverage beside her. Not exactly. You're making this far worse than it is. Am I? You are. Izuku slinked back slightly from the thunderous exchange, feeling the oppressive force radiating from the woman beside him and the indifferent facade of Akamine. I am merely suggesting that you go on another of these walks that the two of you went on, something that you seem to have enjoyed. I'm not making you do anything physical. Izuku blushed and turned his head away as Rumi flushed ever so slightly, Akamine rolling her eyes at their naivety. Ma'am, I'm not going to enjoy anything if I know I'm getting filmed by some creep I can't even see, Rumi barked, chopsticks slamming down on the table. Can we? Izuku spoke. You experience that every day you go into the field, it's no different. Akamine responded. That's Miruko, not Rumi. They're different. They know everything about Miruko. They don't need to know about Rumi. What if we... All you have to do is walk for 20 minutes down a street, and then you're done. That's all you have to do, and you're guaranteed the number 4 spot. How hard is that? Well, why don't you do it then, knowing someone's watching your every move while trying to act normal? I think... I'm not the one that is a pro-hero. I'm not the one who wants to be number 1. You're the one who can make those dreams come true. Izuku pouted at being cut off yet again as his eyebrow twitched. So shouldn't I get to make those decisions? To choose whether or not it's worth it? You've been... Hey! Izuku shouted, getting their attention finally as he sighed. Why does it matter? What exactly? The paper. What they said. Izuku scratched his cheek out of nerves. If people want to think something, let them. If Rumi-san wants to say something, let her say what she wants. Akamine sighed, rubbing her forehead with her hands at what he said. Because then the suits get upset and throw a fit about wanting an answer. Rumi cut off, drawing a defeated nod from Akamine. That's dumb, Izuku said simply. It's politics, Akamine muttered. Rumi, feel free to respond however you want. Wait, really? Both the caramel-skinned woman and the green-haired boy shared an unbelieving glance. I'm tired of fighting you on it. You rose to the number 5 spot by being blunt. Just be you. Rumi pumped her fist as Akamine gave an exasperated smile, shaking her head. Now, Midoriya-san has class soon, and you have patrol soon as well. Might I suggest giving your statement before then? I'll squeeze it in. Rumi shot up, stretching as Izuku glanced away. See ya, kid. The woman disappeared into the deeper ends of the apartment as Izuku himself rose, glancing about. Your bag is there on the chair, Midoriya-san. He gave a smile, dressed in his freshly cleaned uniform. Oh, and Midoriya-san? Yes. He trailed off at the sight of the woman holding up his drawing of Rumi, a flush creeping over his cheeks. Don't worry, she hasn't seen it. He gave a shy nod, plucking the paper from the woman's outreached hand. It's quite accurate, might I say? Thanks, he murmured, slinging the book bag over his shoulder. Bye, Rata-san. Good day, Midoriya-san. Izuku's phone chimed as he crossed the threshold of UA, absent of reporters now. He opened it, noticing he'd been texted a link from Akamine. The boy clicked it as his phone leapt onto a news video. Miruko, what's your word on the allegations about you in the paper? Can you confirm them? Do you indeed have romantic interest in the high schooler? Who cares if I am dating him? Why shouldn't I? The reporters went fairly quiet at the woman's words, her broad grin meeting them easily. Haven't you seen him? He's cute as hell. Izuku's face was flaming as he watched the live video. Can you see this relationship progressing despite the large age gap? Let me ask him. The woman withdrew her phone and began tapping away. Izuku's face paled as his phone started ringing, not even aware she had had his number. He took 3 quick breaths before answering the phone. Hello? Sup? Can you see our relationship progressing despite the age gap? Izuku was glad he wasn't on camera since he was fairly sure he was glowing. Despite that, he knew he couldn't exactly let her down since she was on speakerphone. I don't see why not. I don't care about your age. Thanks, see ya. The call ended and he watched the video, seeing Rumi tuck the phone back into her leotard as she grinned at the reporters. So both you and Midoriya-san admit that there is indeed a relationship between the both of you? Didn't you just hear us talk about it? Need me to clean out your ears? The reporter was sufficiently cowed as Izuku laughed, trudging down the path to class. I've got things to do. Crime doesn't rest. The green-haired boy turned off the video as another ping came from his phone. Rata Akamine, she seems to have gone with my plan. Midoriya Izuku, I saw. Rata Akamine. Good luck. Izuku furrowed his brow at the foreboding message, electing to ignore it as he slipped his phone into his bag. He took the stairs 2 at a time as the bell rang for school, practically skidding down the hall. He slid the door open and met the blank face of Aizawa. Sorry I'm late, Aizawa-sensei. The man's dark gaze bore down on Izuku with such dispassion that it terrified the boy. You'll give me 5 pull-ups from the doorway. Izuku blinked at the punishment as his eyes trailed up, seeing the top of the doorway 20 feet in the air. Without using your quirk. Izuku's mouth fell open slightly as he met his teacher's neutral look. Being on the phone with your girlfriend doesn't justify tardiness. Izuku gaped at the man. How did... Mineta didn't stop playing it at full volume the entire time. The man grumbled, Izuku's eyes trailing to the small boy whose arms were duct-taped to his torso and a strip over his mouth. Get started. Izuku gulped, shrugging off his bag and staring at the tall doorway. He spared a glance at his teacher, the man having already looked away and now reading through the lesson plan. The boy walked over, grabbing his chair and desk with a huff. Stop distracting the class! The man grunted, leveling Izuku with a glare at the noise he'd made. The boy winced and set the table and chair down gingerly. He stacked the chair atop the table carefully. He scaled the desk with a huff before getting on top of the chair, the top of the doorway a few feet out of his reach. He frowned before smiling suddenly, going down as quietly as he could. Izuku was more than aware of the burning gaze of his teacher on the back of his head as he tried his best to be quiet, taking Mineta's desk since the boy was not using it, nor could he. He frowned as he realized they would simply stack straight up. You have another 30 seconds to finish your punishment, or it's going against your grade. Izuku gulped at the threat and stacked the desk on top of the first one, climbing softly before clambering on top of the chair. 25 seconds. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized that there was no lip for the door, seamless with the wall. He clambered down the tower of table and chair. Quiet. I won't say it again. The boy rummaged through his bag, getting the metal ruler he'd bought in a package deal. 15. The youngest Midoriya did his best to scale the tower once more, cocking his arm back before stabbing through the simple dry wall used above the door. 10. Izuku gulped at the reminder, jamming his fingers in the new holes and doing his best to get a good grip. 5. The boy was already on his second pull-up when his teacher spoke, finishing quickly. Take a seat and stop disrupting my class, Aizawa said simply as Izuku panted lightly, staring incredulously at his teacher, who acted as though that hadn't just happened. Izuku slowly got down, taking apart his tower. He patted the dust off his fingers and his ruler and made his way over, putting Mineta's desk back as well as his own. As he walked past his teacher with his chair, the man decided to speak. Since you went plus ultra, I won't punish you for defacing school property. Izuku glanced at his teacher, half-lidded dark eyes staring back. Izuku gulped before nodding, taking his seat at his desk. Time for English, kiddos, President Meek shouted, the class meeting him with blank stares. Such a tough crowd. All right, let's get our vocals going. Psst. Izuku glanced over at the noise, Kirishima giving him a thumbs up and a wink. I knew it, he whispered, Izuku turning back to his desk while trying his best to ignore the boy across from him. Mineta buzzed with activity. Mirio-senpai. The blonde teen glanced up, noticing that Midoriya had come back today. Oh, hey, Midoriya-kun, he said with a smile. I guess you're off the market now, huh? Mirio took note of the boy's clenched fist and tension. Ah, you want that spa now, don't you? Yes, please, Mirio-senpai. The tall teen nodded before rising with a stretch. I wonder what your quirk is. It's got to be super strong to impress Miruko. Also, I think she's right, and you are really cute. Is your hair naturally that soft, or— Tamaki silenced her with a rice ball. I'll be back soon, I think, Mirio said cheerily. Come, Midoriya-kun, I know just the place. The tall teen set down the hall, Midoriya following him easily as he gripped the straps of his bag. Silence reigned for several moments as the two walked down the empty halls of the large school, Mirio clearly having a destination in mind. So, Midoriya-kun, why are you so upset? Izuku's eyes widened. Mirio spared him a look over the shoulder. It's pretty obvious with the way you're acting. Feel free to confide in your senior. That's what we're here for. Izuku bit the inside of his cheek as the two walked, letting the silence speak for him. I see, Mirio muttered. It probably has something to do with the announcement from this morning, right? Izuku's silence was once more telling. Well, if it is then, I suppose you could think of it as training, Mirio commented as they stepped outside, following a cement path. Training? Izuku asked, furrowed brows as he stared at the solid back of his senior. Of course. The fame of being a pro hero, not everyone could withstand it. Take the time now to get used to it. I'm sure the pressure is insane. Izuku's face blanked at the words, understanding dawning on him. Okay, we're here, Mirio exclaimed with a smile, the two standing before a massive gym. 1 second. Izuku's eyes widened farther than they ever had as Mirio phased through the door as though it weren't there, his shirt and jacket falling in a heap on the floor. The door clicked open, revealing Mirio himself. Izuku nearly gaped at the sheer condition of Mirio's physique, hardened muscle akin to all mites and scars littering his body to show the sheer amount Mirio has trained. "Sorry about that. I have these pants made specially so they don't come off, but I have to wear the school shirts." He scooped up the clothes and brought them inside. "This is Gym Gamma." Izuku glanced around the massive vaulted gym, empty and looking larger than any other building on campus. "It doesn't look like much, but that's because the floor is special for Cementos to manipulate. It's a dreamland for training quirks," the muscular teen commented, stretching as he walked a bit away. Izuku decided to take off his bag and jacket, hesitating slightly before also taking off his shirt and shoes. "All right. Want to go to first blow?" Mirio asked, doing side stretches. "First 5, please, Mirio-senpai." Izuku pulled his foot, stretching his thigh. "Sure thing. You've been leaving me in suspense about your quirk," the blonde exclaimed, same large smile on his face. "Just say when you're ready." Izuku took a deep breath, stretching his shoulders and ankles the best he could. The boy slapped his cheeks, lowering himself with a deep exhale before standing straight. "Ready," Mirio beamed. "Let's have a good match." And with those words, the taller boy disappeared into the floor. Izuku's eyes shot open in alarm, glancing about every which way. He was tense, waiting for his senior to pop up as he looked around as though expecting him to appear out of thin air. "Missed me!" Izuku barely turned in time for Mirio to land a blow on his shoulder, the sheer power sending Izuku tumbling as the boy tried to right himself. "Wow, you're not bad for a first year. You took that like a champ." Izuku gulped, lowering into a stance as Mirio bounced from foot to foot. "Let's kick it up!" The blonde blasted forward in a dead run, and Izuku steeled himself, lashing out with a low sweep that went through the blonde. Izuku's eyes widened, just in time for him to bring his hand up to catch the fist coming for him. It phased through his hand and punched him in the face, once more sending the boy sprawling. "That's 2 for me, Midoriya-kun," Mirio sang. "You really are good, though. It's just a shame that I'm better." Izuku's jaw tightened at the taunting of the boy as his fists clenched. "Round 3." Izuku ignored the dull hum in his jaw from the pain as Mirio once more burst forward in a run, that same smile still on his face. The youngest Midoriya tensed as his senior once more came within reach. He sent out a punch that phased through Mirio, the blonde's fist cocking back as he loomed over the green-haired first year. Izuku's free hand shot up, palm open against his face. He gasped in pain as the fist instead buried itself in his gut, the blonde jogging past as Midoriya crumpled slightly. "You're reacting pretty well. You're not going to win if you don't use your quirk, though. Well, you're not going to win anyway." Izuku slowly got to his feet as his fist clenched to the breaking point. "Mirio-senpai, can you keep a secret?" "Oh? What kind of secret?" the blonde replied, hands on his hips and not even slightly winded whilst Izuku panted. "I can't say unless you promise me you won't share it." The blonde held a hand to his chin as he hummed. "Okay, I don't see why not, so long as you don't reveal that you're a villain or something." The blonde joked. "Great." Green lightning cackled for just a brief moment as Izuku had cleared the distance between them in an instant, catching Mirio off guard just enough to land a powered blow against the boy's shoulder. "Wow, what a quirk!" Mirio exclaimed, jumping to his feet as Izuku hovered a few inches above the ground. "That's some powerful speed quirk," Mirio remarked. "That's the secret. I have 2 quirks, Mirio-senpai." The green-haired boy clenched his fist that had turned an irritated red. Only my family knows about it, so please. I'll keep your secret, so long as you stop holding back on me. Mirio got into a pose as he and Izuku exchanged bright, challenging grins. Of course, Mirio-senpai. Great, let's get back to it. Mirio and Izuku met mid-air, the green-eyed Midoriya suddenly completely inverting his stance, and where he had been was now only occupied by a foot. Mirio's eyes widened as he hit pure air, whilst Izuku's foot sailed through him. The green-haired boy was once more on the offensive, blasting through the blonde from behind as Mirio gaped at the speed. Blue eyes tracked Izuku as he turned in the air, hovering over a dozen feet in the air. I'm sure you're going to be a monster of a hero when you make it there, Midoriya-kun, the blonde said cheerfully as Izuku returned the smile, both having worked up a small sweat. You too, Mirio-senpai. Your mastery of your quirk is amazing. Mirio puffed up with pride before disappearing into the wall beside him. Izuku blasted into the middle of the room as the wall where he'd been revealed Mirio's face. Just a bit too slow. I guess I'll have to speed it up, the blonde declared, before once more disappearing into the wall. Izuku gulped, looking all around the large gym as he tensed. His eyes widened as he caught sight of the older teen flying out of the wall where he'd emerged moments ago, not even having moved like he'd eluded. Izuku pulled down, but it wasn't enough as Mirio came crashing down. The green-haired boy hissed in pain as he crashed against the ground, Mirio's punch having shot him down. His eyes narrowed in determination and spun, catching Mirio off guard with a kick to the sternum. 4-2, Mirio-senpai! Izuku panted, wincing in pain as he held his ground. Mirio laughed, getting up from where he'd been kicked to as he stared at the boy not far away. You are doing far better than I thought, Midoriya-kun. If the rest of your class is like this, I'm sure the world is in good hands. The blonde tensed in a position as Izuku did the same. Here I come, Midoriya-kun. This wouldn't be as it looks, surely. The two stopped in their tracks, turning to the door of the gym where Nezu himself was stood alongside Hound Dog, who huffed audibly. Both boys gulped as they stood straight. I take full responsibility. I take full responsibility. The two had bowed and shouted at the same time, sparing each other surprised looks. Nezu laughed, surprising the two as they slowly rose from their bow. With such heartfelt heroism, I've half a mind not to administer a punishment. Nezu, Hound Dog rumbled, the principal sighing at the word. Yes, I'm aware I need to punish them. The rodent's eyes danced as he clapped. Midoriya-chan, since you have a very strenuous heroics class in a few moments, your punishment will be not being able to visit Recovery Girl before then. The boy gulped at the punishment, the smile from his principal conveying the hidden message that this is non-negotiable. And as for Tagata-chan, I think this will suffice. Nezu withdrew a folded dunce cap, the other three staring at it in fascination. The rodent unfolded it, and it popped into a true dunce cap. You may not take it off for the rest of the day. I'll wear it with honor, Mirio exclaimed with a smile, the cap matching him well. Nezu smiled wider, even as Hound Dog huffed in a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. Very well. I assume you two boys can find your classes easily enough, Nezu said, turning as he left the gym, Hound Dog glaring at them. Next time, you won't get off so easy, the guidance counselor warned, the two boys nodding as the man walked out. I win, Mirio said simply, walking over to his clothes as Izuku balked. No, it's a tie, Izuku declared as Mirio poked a hand to the sky, dunce cap elevating his height. I was in the lead and would have won if not for Nezu's timely intervention, so I win. Izuku frowned. It was a tie, Mirio-senpai. Mirio waved off the words as both boys started getting dressed, ignoring the faint sweat as well as their bruises. You can lie to yourself all you want, Midoriya-kun. It was my win. Izuku sighed, still smiling despite the fact as he'd gotten the chance to do this spar. Thank you for the spar, Mirio-senpai. Mirio hummed in glee as he tied his tie, while Izuku threw his bag on, not having bothered with the tie since the battle trial. If you ever find yourself needing another one, you can always rely on your trusty senior. You did amazingly. I can't wait till you get stronger. Izuku smiled at the praise as he extended his hand. The two rough hands met in a shake as they smiled at one another. Izuku gave a sheepish laugh as he retracted his hand. Sorry about you getting punished. Mirio glanced up, clearly not able to see his cap. Oh, it's all right. It's not too bad. And besides, I had a lot of fun. They both quirked their heads up at the sound of the campus bell ringing. I guess that's our cue. I guess thanks again, Mirio-senpai, Izuku called, starting down the path to the opposite end of the main building from Mirio. Good luck, Midoriya-kun! Luck would not shine on Midoriya. Welcome to the USJ. The class looked around. 13 stood beside Aizawa as they looked around the massive dome. Easily the largest roof structure in UA, spanning over the course of a mile in every direction from the center. The unforeseen simulation joint is a creation of my own design, something that has become an integral part of hero training here at UA, the heroine stated, arms spread wide. There are several disaster zones, each different from the other, and each will test you in a different way, both as a hero and a person. Remember, do not inflict harm in this building. This is for saving, not hurting. A strange warble filled the air, sounding like a pan being waved as their attention turned to the fountain below them in the center. A small ripple occurred before a small purple circle the size of a dinner plate was made. A gnarled hand shoved itself through the circle, revealing it to be a portal as it was physically forced open, one maniacal red eye gleaming up at the class. Is this a part of the simulation? Despite the ease of the question, Kirishima's voice had a noticeable tremble in it as that red eye stared at them almost hungrily. Aizawa strut forward, lowering his goggles. No, it's not. 13. Get the students out. Now. Without further preamble, the man leapt down the steps, taking them a dozen at a time as the portal finished opening to the size of a massive torii gate. And out of it came a great mixture of characters, all wielding a weapon, all smirking, all villains. It's a villain attack, Kaminari gasped. That was the last word said before the whole class stiffened in a mixture of fear and shock. Out from the portal stepped 4 final figures. The first was a man with a series of detached hands along his person, and the owner of that red eye that had looked at them, teal hair hiding any visible features. Beside him was a man in seemingly no clothes at all, his entire body being coated in that same purple mist that had made the portal, while 2 blazing yellow slits acted as his eyes. Towering over them all was a massive abomination of purple skin and tattered pants, with a beak and a visible brain alongside 2 mindless eyes, its hulking form comparable to that of All Might as it lumbered alongside the others. And finally was the man on the left-hand side of the Handman, a man taller than the others by a significant margin, but still shorter than the creature by at least a foot. He had unkempt red hair and pale skin, paler than snow. His skin was tinged red around his eyes, as though he had been bleeding from them. The man also possessed slit red pupils alongside somewhat elongated nails, honed to a point. But most importantly, father. The class snapped their heads to Izuku, who was staring at the pale man, who looked as though he were a literal demon, the man wearing thin clothes to show his lanky, slender physique. "That's your dad?" Kirishima rasped in surprise, staring at the tall man, who looked as though he had come out of a horror film. "We can talk later. For now we must—" "Go!" The voice seemed to be all around them as that same voice, glowing dark purple mist hovering around them alongside yellow-purple eyes that seemed to laugh at their plight. "Go now!" 13 cried, extending a hand as the fingers of her gloves popped off. A powerful suction was created, and some of the purple mist started to get drawn in, only for it to widen immensely. 13 cried in shock and pain as a portal opened behind her, her own suction blowing apart the lower half of her vital suit. The pro-hero collapsed in a shuddering pile and was promptly consumed by the purple mesh. "Now where were we?" "Die!" Bakugo roared, surging forward with an explosive fist. "Rude," the mist man said, head swerving to the side, as Bakugo was also immersed in the mist. "I think it's time you all got some activity. It's needed in a growing child's life." Before any of them could react, the ground underneath them was encompassed in murky darkness, and then they all fell. Izuku sputtered as he got level with the water he'd crashed into, now aware of truly what had just happened. The image of his father burned in his eyes, overcoming his rational thoughts and awareness. He was dimly aware of a villain with a shark mutant quirk lunging at him as a tongue yanked him out of the water. He sailed through the air like a sack of potatoes and landed on the deck of the yacht with a wet slap. "That was close," the somewhat rippled voice of Asui said as Izuku looked up, seeing the girl not far away and Mineta shaking against the wall. Izuku panted as he sat up on his knees, staring dully against the wall. "It's really him," the boy whispered. "Midoriya-kun, I get that seeing your father like that is terrifying, but I need you with me right now," Asui said, placing a hand on his shoulder as seaweed green met emerald. "Right. Sorry, Asui-san," Izuku said as a shadow of a smile graced his face, one that Asui returned tenfold. "Call me Tsu. All my friends do." He gave a nod as he stood, fist clenching as he cleared his mind. He looked over the railing of the boat and winced at the sight of over a dozen villains floating in the water. "How are we going to get out of here? We're doomed if we don't—" "So dead," Mineta murmured as Izuku frowned. The thought of using float danced in his mind, calling to him. His eyes shut, thinking on how a true hero would do whatever it takes to save their friends, no matter the cost. "Guys, I have a way of getting us out of here." Izuku spoke up, drawing their attention to him as he looked uncharacteristically blank. "Just trust me." "Sure thing," Asui said with a shrug. "So long as you save us, I'll do whatever you want, Midoriya." Mineta sobbed, clinging to the youngest Midoriya. Izuku gave a lopsided grin and picked Mineta up, as though he were a baby. "Tsu-san, could you climb onto my back?" She did so without questioning, surprising the green-haired boy. "Hold on tight." And without further preamble, Izuku floated up. "What is this? Why can you fly?" Mineta stammered, gripping Izuku tighter. "You have different quirks," Asui stated, it not being a question or a thought, as Izuku nodded gravely. "I promise, I'll explain later." The boy burst across the water, easily taking them to shore as the villains watched with frowns. "They aren't following," Asui said simply, the villains instead meandering to the other side of the lake. Izuku guided them to the edge of the water just in time for Aizawa to finish off the rest of the lesser villains, only the three leaders standing before him. "Stay low. We'll jump in when we can," Izuku whispered, the other two giving different levels of nods as they crouched behind a small land formation, just close enough to hear their conversation. "Eraserhead, a hero that could have been the perfect villain," the tall Midoriya said simply, not having moved since entering through the portal. "Such a waste." Despite his clear disadvantage, Aizawa was remarkably calm about the upcoming fight. "Would you look at that? 13 managed to allow one little munchkin to escape," the red-haired man stated. "Shh, he's going to get reinforcements. All Might isn't even here. We should leave this dump." The teal-haired man rasped, scratching at his dry neck as it turned red from the irritation. "He has just left to go get help. Who better to come help than All Might himself?" the Midoriya asked, lips curling into a vulpine grin as Aizawa threw his capture tool at them. A sound of wrath exploded from the tall redhead as an explosive beam of fire blew from his mouth, blowing away the capture tool as well as making Aizawa reposition. The man leapt away, capture tool smoking and singed as it fell to the ground beside him. "Weren't you ever taught your manners at this prestigious academy?" the Midoriya said with a sigh. "Well, we'll need to make All Might irrational before he arrives. I give it 50 seconds. I recognize the boy who escaped." "My pleasure." The teal-haired man flew forward with a speed that belied his size as he cleared the distance between he and Aizawa remarkably quick, coming within reach of the man easily. Aizawa threw a punch only for the man with hands to practically bend around it, showing immense agility as he ducked to the teacher's side. Aizawa couldn't react fast enough, and the man grasped his elbow, causing it to turn grey and the skin to flake away. "Apologies. I allowed one of them to escape," the man of mist announced as he stepped out of nothing, coming up beside the tall Midoriya. "It is no problem, Kurogiri. He will bring All Might to us, so you did well." The newly identified Kurogiri paused slightly. "I see," he said, watching as the teal-haired cackled whilst Aizawa's elbow flaked. It had barely been in contact for a moment, but the skin had already rotted away to reveal bright red muscle. Aizawa landed a mule kick against the handman, only for the beaked monster to put a hand on his back and slam him into the earth like he had no resistance whatsoever. The bird creature clicked and clacked as it pinned the man to the ground easily. "Nomu, cover his eyes," the red-haired Midoriya ordered, the Nomu doing such by wrapping a hand around the man's face, while the rest of it's being forced him against the ground. "Good. It would be ideal for All Might to witness the death of innocent souls. Why not start with my quirkless failure of a son?" Izuku stood, glaring at his own father. "Or maybe make him be the cherry on top." A voice rasped behind the trio. Izuku spun in surprise, only for a portal to open beneath him. He flailed, but was grasped around the neck from behind, the unnerving smile of his own father leaning over his shoulder. "Now watch. Watch, as everything you know is ruined, just as you did to me." Izuku stilled in fear, as smoke tresses rose from the edges of his father's mouth, while the blue-haired man gripped Asui and Mineta both around the neck, one finger hovering as he lifted them to the edge of the fountain. Izuku let out shuddering gasps as time creeped by, every second seeming like hours as he felt his own power grow restless. "And just how did something as asinine as you get into this prestigious academy HM?" the tall man asked, grip tightening ever so slightly on his son's nape. "Perhaps it's prestige, and standards have dropped since my attendance." Izuku said nothing, biding his time until All Might arrived, going over the fact that they did not know he had a quirk and that he could catch them off guard. He glanced to his left, seeing Asui closest to him and Mineta on the farther side. "Midoriya!" Izuku twitched at the call, the hand tightening on his neck as Todoroki came into view. His heterochromatic eyes widened at the scene as a majority of their class followed him onto the scene. "Deku!" Bakugo burst onto the scene, the remainder of their class outside of Ida following him as the entirety of 1A stared at the elevated fountain and the classmates held by villains. "Wonderful," the teal-haired man rasped. "Shigaraki Tomura. Perhaps we should—" "Silence, Kurogiri." The newly identified Shigaraki ordered, Izuku catching sight of a sickening grin on his face that made his stomach feel as though it were lined with lead. Now we can end an entire class. Nomu, kill." Doors banged, literally flying, and one even came close as it slammed into the ground just past the fountain, cutting off all noise at the sheer power. "It's fine now," the voice boomed as though it were in their very ears as every single pair of eyes became captivated by the appearance of a single man. All Might leapt out of the dust of the destroyed door like he had wings. In an instant, the number one hero slammed into the earth like a mini comet. Ground shook as several students were tossed off their feet. The very earth split beneath the man's power, and Izuku felt a terrifying shiver go down his spine at the non-smiling face of All Might. "I am here. Yes, you are All Might. Here for your own execution," Shigaraki cackled, finger twitching to a close. In an instant, everything changed. Izuku spun, utilizing float to rip himself from his father's grasp even as the man's breath heated. The boy flew as fast as he could as All Might launched himself, slamming into the Nomu just as it made to crush Aizawa's skull. Izuku looped an arm around Asui's waist as he blasted forward, time seeming to slow to a crawl as he ripped her free from Shigaraki's hold. His other arm was outstretched as he came within a hair's breadth away from Mineta. Mineta had a look of pure, unadulterated terror on his face as Shigaraki's finger edged closer, Izuku barely grazing Mineta as realization struck them all. Midoriya was going to make it. Time stopped as Shigaraki used more strength than it seemed he could possibly have and jerked back Mineta just in time, Izuku flying past as all of his fingers closed around Mineta's throat. "Too slow, hero." Izuku's eyes widened in horror as one single red eye gleamed at him. The entirety of the USJ watched as Mineta was reduced to ash from the neck up, fear and terror being the last emotion to ever cross the boy's face. "Well, I guess just one is okay." Those were the words Shigaraki said as All Might flew forward with a roar of rage, his fist coming within mere inches of Shigaraki's face. A portal appeared, moving the punch and having it slam into Izuku with full strength. "Young Midoriya!" All Might's voice was horrified as he jerked his arm back, the no-move from before slamming the man from the side and away. "Well, isn't this fun?" Shigaraki cackled, spires of ice roaring as they made their way for the villain trio. The eldest Midoriya stepped in front of them, arching in a seemingly impossible way before snapping forward. A tsunami of fire blew from his mouth, matching and melting the ice before it could hope to reach them. Bakugo blew overhead, flying over the rolling fire and aiming both hands at all three of them. Kurogiri created a portal between them as the blast was taken away and redirected into the air, the explosion reaching far and high. Abruptly, Bakugo flew underneath the portal and reappeared right in front of Kurogiri with a snarl of rage. The explosive blonde was abruptly snagged back by a span of tape just as Shigaraki slashed through the space Bakugo would have occupied. Yaoyorozu burst forward alongside Tokoyami, the class moving in harmony as Shigaraki cackled, arms spread wide as he stared at the group of students. Thugs burst from the sides as the two forces charged at one another. Show me your hero spirit! Uraraka-san, Yaoyorozu called, the brunette sliding into action beside her as the creation girl created an entire tarp, its size increasing constantly as it grew and grew in a matter of a few seconds. Kill the girl, a thug barked, another drawing a handgun as Yaoyorozu's face widened in fear. Kirishima leapt in front of her just as the shot was fired, the bullet bouncing off his hardened skin easily. Now, Uraraka-san! The girl threw the tarp as Uraraka touched it, the massive tarp casting a constantly enlarging shadow. Now, Tokoyami-san! Of course! Shadow! A massive amalgamation of purple darkness and yellow eyes burst from Tokoyami's robes, flying forward alongside the boy. He burst forward as a tall wall of ice blocked off the villains from both the Nomu as well as Midoriya Sr. This is getting interesting, right, Kurogiri? Shigaraki rasped, watching the teamwork of the class as his grin grew. We must remember, Shigaraki Tamura, that the other teachers are more than likely en route. It seemed the wind was blown from his sails as Shigaraki shook his head with a low sigh. Fine, let's just focus on All Might. He's the main course after all. The teal-haired man rasped, the two stepping through a portal and leaving behind the thugs to get thrashed by the students. Ahead, the two stepped out on the other side of the ice barricade and bore witness to All Might and the Nomu having a massive slugfest, as Midoriya Sr. walked to the side where his soul scion was sat beside the girl he'd saved. Which is better, a father erasing his mistake or the death of the symbol of peace? Shigaraki asked, the sick smile in full force as he watched All Might rain blow after blow against the Nomu. Well, he will be the last symbol after all. Midoriya-kun! I need you right now, Midoriya-kun! Izuku was sat on his knees, staring at the sight of his father, who was slowly walking their way, an arrogant smile on the man's face as he stared at the two children. Leave us, girl. This is a family matter, the man said dispassionately, giving Asui a thin glare as he ran a slender hand through his hair. The frog girl squared herself as she glared at the tall man. She was cut off before she could even start by Izuku's hand settling on her shoulder, the youth now having stood up and meeting his father's stare with his own. It's okay, Tsusan. Go on, they need you. She frowned, staring at the man who oozed danger. That doesn't mean you don't need me, she said resolutely, Izuku turning to her with a thin, shadowed smile. Don't worry. I'll be right behind you. I can take him. She still did not seem to believe him, as she continued to glance between both he and his father. Izuku squeezed her shoulder, drawing her attention. Please, Tsusan. She looked noticeably upset before giving him a resolute nod and hopping away, giving the dangerous man a wide berth, even as he waggled his fingers at her. Congratulations, you managed to save one life today. Shame it's not two. Where did you go? Izuku asked, cutting off the man who quirked a brow at his scion. Where? Anywhere other than where you were, of course. Izuku stilled. What? You thought that I would stay under the same roof as a boy who would never make anything of himself? My own spawn? No. But, Mom, your mother was an intriguing woman who drove herself to ruin for you. Izuku looked visibly shaken by the words. What, you thought she was always someone who doted on useless children? No. She used to be brilliant, and then she let her emotions for you ruin her. Speaking of, how is Inko? She's dead. Izuku barked out, the man's expression finally changing for the first time that night, as genuine shock flashed across his face. Killed by a villain just like you. I see. Midoriya Hisashi seemed to come to terms with the fact the woman he had once loved was now dead. Face blank for several moments, and Izuku was slightly taken aback by the sadness on his face. You don't get to feel sad. It matters not. Hisashi said, eyes now narrowed into sharp rubies that could cut through the earth's core. Now that I know I won't be breaking her heart, I no longer have any reservations about finally getting rid of you. Izuku's jaw clenched as well as his fist as he met the glare of his father with one of his own, green and red, clashing as the two Soul Midoriya men stared one another down. And I'm going to take you down and make sure you're thrown in jail. In the name of my mother. Hisashi stared at him for a short moment before laughing uproariously, clearly finding genuine amusement in the words. Clearly she never told you that she hated you too. Hisashi's were cold and calculated as Izuku stilled once more in shock. The tall man capitalized on it, lunging forward with a powerful kickoff as his mouth began to glow. Izuku's eyes widened and instantly flew up and away as flame blasted through where he had just been. I knew it. A useless rat like you with no quirk just had to find a way to steal someone else's. You truly are scum. Hisashi roared, face twisted in the clear beginnings of mania and rage as once more fire roared. It was as though a literal dragon had emerged from the tails of old massive streams of uncontrolled flame, spewed and flew through the air, warming the entire atmosphere as Izuku flew about. I'm glad you stole someone's quirk. Izuku stilled in the air as his father drew in deep lungfuls of air. It makes killing you the ultimate justice. First you ruin my life, then your own mother's and someone else's. You just don't stop making things worse, do you? Izuku was clearly stricken by the words as he flew about, the words bouncing in his head as fire surged after and around him. Come down, little fly, come to Papa. Izuku's eyes widened at the words, and in his surprise, he wasn't ready for a more concise burst of flames to slam into him, the boy screaming under the oppressive burn. The boy fell down through the air, screaming as the fire licked and burnt him. They all come crashing down, Hisashi cackled, a twisted psychotic leer in his eye as he watched Izuku crash down into the water. You'll have to come out sometime, little fly. Here, let me give you a helping hand. The man blew fire into the water where his son had fallen in, the boy sinking deep into the dark depths of the lake as the fire covered the water. The temperature of the water rose as bubbles began to trail up, the water heating higher and higher. Izuku peered through the water through half-lidded eyes as he felt his breath begin to slip, pain surrounding his being as words bounced in his head. Useless rat like you. Scum. Ruin my life, and she hated you too. So long as you save us, I'll do whatever you want, Midoriya. Izuku felt the will to fight leave him more and more as he saw the bubbles of his own air go up, the flash of his father's flames flying. The boy felt oh so cold, but he knew he deserved it. He'd failed. He wasn't worthy. And as Izuku shut his eyes in the darkness, an all-encompassing light shined bright. Images flashed in the boy's head of a certain dark-skinned woman with a dazzling smile and soft eyes danced in his head as image after image flashed through his mind. If you want me to call you something other than kid, impress me. Haven't you seen him? He's cute as hell. Can you see our relationship progressing despite the age gap? Who cares if I am dating him? Why shouldn't I? And finally, the sight of waking up with her snoring on his chest flashed through the boy's mind, just as he felt the last bit of air leave his lungs. The water was nearly scalding, but despite everything against him, Izuku's eyes snapped open. "What is that light?" Hisashi hissed, staring at the bubbling water where his son had disappeared. A bright golden light was shining from deep in the depths of the ice-blue water. The light grew brighter and brighter before it became its brightest, Hisashi's arm raising as water splashed. The sky itself seemed to be dim under the dominating brightness that has now emerged, yellow and golden in its beauty. "What are you?" Hisashi roared, removing his arm to look at the blinding sight that was his son. The boy was floating in the air with two bright golden astral wings on his back, fanned high and far in each side as though to enunciate him as a holy being. Hisashi focused just enough to see even his eyes changed, that same bright yellow holy color as the wings, as the boy stared down at his father. "I'm your son." With those words, the boy flew forward, slamming into the man with the force of 9 generations of one for all. The man flew back, flying into the clearing they had just left. "So, bested by your quirkless son, huh?" Shigaraki asked, staring down at the red-haired man who had just fallen in front of them. The entire area was tense, All Might injured with the Nomu's fingers dug in his side. It was frozen between two portals while clinging to the #1 hero. The class watched as Izuku walked onto the scene, golden wings still fanned wide as he stared at the scene. "All Might," the boy said, eyes widening in shock while showcasing their new color. "Young Midoriya!" The man choked, blood seeping through his shirt from where the Nomu gripped him. "That monster has multiple quirks. It's no son of mine." Hisashi spat, rising as he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Shigaraki turned to the astral boy who was looking back at him. "Interesting," was all Shigaraki said as he glanced over. The sight of Kurogiri cornered by 2 boys irked him. Well, no time like the present. Shigaraki burst forward, reaching for All Might with a sick grin, as the man's eyes widened in his immobile state. Izuku flew between them, getting in the man's path with surprising speed. "Multiple quirks, huh? Well, I guess I'll just get rid of the bastardized sensei first. Nomu, free our gate, and kill the blonde brat." With those words, Shigaraki ran for Izuku, who flew back and just out of range of the man's swipe. The Nomu broke itself apart, letting its frozen pieces break away as though it hadn't just lost a majority of its body. It slinked through the portal and began regenerating in front of their eyes as All Might rolled to his feet, clutching his bloodied side. The man suddenly leapt to the side as a blast of flame blew through where he had just been. The #1 hero burst forward, burying his fist in the man's gut and sending him flying into the fountain. All Might turned, blasting ahead and taking the blow in Bakugo's stead. The man coughed blood, alarming the students at the man's weakness as Kurogiri flew away. All Might suddenly shot forward, engaging in a slug fest with the Nomu once more. "You fragile little boy, wanting a license to inflict whatever violence you want." Shigaraki spoke calmly as he stared up at Izuku, who floated a safe distance above the man. "Heroes save people. They fight villains. They don't inflict violence," Izuku said with a frown, his brightness having dialed down. Shigaraki shook his head, tutting loudly. "Villain, hero, what's the difference? Both of them use their quirks to do whatever they deem necessary, just as it was necessary for the death of that boy. You are all just pawns being pushed around by a corrupt system. Mineta was more than that." Izuku's voice sounded as though he had 1,000 voices in his throat as he spoke, his brightness flaring as his wings flared wide. Shigaraki was not bothered by the sudden change. Of course, a pawn looks different to a fellow pawn. It is only us distinguishable pieces that can tell. You're all simple soldiers to be tossed aside. Izuku shot down like a missile as Shigaraki grinned, the boy becoming blinded by the anger the taunts provoked. The teal-haired man sidestepped the kick that cracked the earth, reaching forward and grazing the boy's arm, but not gripping it. He tutted as the boy once more flew away, his face drawn in a tight grimace. It seems the truth hurts. It's all right, little fake. You could become a knight under the right hand. Shigaraki extended a hand. Join me. With our power, we could fix this corrupt system. I would never join a murderer, Izuku growled, voice echoing in his own throat as he spoke. They both turned as a vacuum of air was briefly created, and the power to the USJ flickered as the Nomu blasted through and out of the roof. It seems the bishop's been taken out, Shigaraki murmured, scratching at his neck. Remember, boy, one of your classmates is dust because of you. A portal sucked up Shigaraki before Izuku could do a thing. Izuku looked to the side, seeing the rising plume of steam around where All Might had been. The boy's eyes widened, and he flew forwards, bursting into the steam before anyone else could get near. All Might. The boy's voice had returned to normal as the bright light went away, the man leaning against his pupil as he stared at him. Young Midoriya, you... Yes, I activated another quirk, and everyone saw. I know. The boy threw the man's arm over his shoulder as a cement barrier formed around them while making a direct path to the exit. Young Midoriya, I'm sorry that I wasn't fast enough. The man choked out as Izuku's face stiffened, his whole body going rigid as he handed the pro-hero off to Midnight and Snipe. Me too. I figured this is where you'd be. It was late at night, the moon high in the sky, and its pale light bathing the beach and sea beneath it in a fresh glow that made it as bright as any sunlight. And on that beach, grunt after grunt of pain sounded as Izuku literally flew around the beach, doing quick pocket trades with Olmec and in a never-ending dance. The green-haired boy was completely zoned in on his activity, not paying the world any attention. Red eyes flashed between a faint worry and disbelief as a layer of sympathy laid over those emotions like a thick blanket. The boy's fist impacted with the mech's metal chest with a painful sound, but Izuku barely winced, already back at it. Rumi watched as he flew at speeds she knew a lot of pro-heroes would struggle to keep up with, let alone steer at. And she could tell he couldn't really. His turns were wide, and his flight was shaky. The boy once more blew past, coming around in a wide blast as his foot slammed down on the mech's head, which gave it just enough momentary pause for the boy to fly away. I didn't think you could fly. She called to the air, watching as he didn't even spare her a glance. Her lips pursed as the boy who had given her all of his attention now gave her none of it. Her eyes widened as lightning crackled before a sound like a jet taking off sounded, and her eyes snapped over, watching as Izuku flew at speed she wasn't sure she could reach. His legs were glowing, rippling with green and red lines as the boy flew horizontal to the ground as he cleared dozens of feet by the second from one edge of the beach to the other. He impacted with the sound of a thunderclap as Olmec was rocketed away, clearing over 100 feet as Rumi's eyes widened at the power. An ever-so-brief exhale of pain drew her attention away from the now disappeared Olmec to the boy who had begun floating once more. Izuku wasn't wearing shoes, something that made his leg even more unsightly. It was black and blue, mixed into a nasty purple all the way up past the ankle as the boy floated above the air, visible lines of blood along the skin at the wound. "All right, that's enough," she ordered, stepping in front of the boy easily. No, it isn't. You don't get to decide that. Her tone was non-negotiable as she glared at the boy who now hovered over the ground as though he were not human. Come on, brat. I'm sure that Toshinori guy is worried sick. He's in the hospital, Izuku said flatly. So what? You're going to put yourself in there? Shit happens, kid. Accept it. It sucks, but it is what it is. His eyes finally met hers, and she met his gaze easily. He suddenly burst into an axe kick, slamming all mech into the sand between them, and she didn't even flinch, having heard the heavy machine. I am here. The bot stood between them easily. Plus, Ultra. So, am I going to drag you off this beach, or are you going to float yourself out? She questioned with a raised brow. Also, what's up with that? I guess a lot of people know now, Izuku muttered, lowering slightly. I have a quirk that is passed from holder to holder. I can use the quirks of the past users. I feel like we would heard about that by now. He frowned at her blatant disregard. She stumbled back as massive golden wings seemed to hover over his back as his eyes glowed a faint light yellow as he radiated light. What the? I wasn't kidding, he mumbled. She scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief as the glow went away. You're going to be some kind of monster, she muttered, watching as his face blanked and his fist clenched. Come on, let's get you to recovery, girl. I can't just float around, Izuku muttered, the woman rolling her eyes. What? You want me to carry you or something? He blinked at the suggestion before gliding behind her and wrapping his legs around her waist. Hey, what do I look like? A taxi? Sorry, Rumi. She paused at the shudder in his voice, recognizing the break for what it was as she bit her lip. She sighed as he gave deep, shuddering breaths against her hood as she held him by the thighs. There, kid. They barely made it 8 feet before she noticed she was carrying dead weight, narrowing her eyes and glancing to the head on her shoulder. He was completely asleep, and she was very annoyed. Do not tell me you're using me as a damn pillow after crying, she grumbled. Stand up, boy. Izuku's eyes dragged open at the voice, feeling the cold air around them and metal floor beneath him. He slowly stood, standing on welded steel in what seemed to be a factory. He glanced up to the only other person, a rough man with crimson hair drawn back in an explosive ponytail. His eyes were hard and the color of blood, his physique that of a fighter more akin to Izuku's own than All Might's. You seem to have awoken my quirk, he said simply, arms crossed with a coat draped over his arms. The man had very toned muscle and looked scarily strong in a lethal way. Yours is the one that emanates the light? The man gave a gravelly hum. It's not so simple. I am the grandson of the first woman to ever have a quirk, hers being the ability to generate light. Izuku's eyes widened. Silence. The man was brutal as he cut off the bai. It is called divine blessing. As if on cue, the man gained an entire suit of the holy light as Izuku's eyes widened. An ethereal robe was cloaked over the man alongside those same wings, and even a hood was resting atop his head, his eyes a shining astral golden as Izuku's had been. Divine blessing is a quirk of imagery. It serves no purpose other than to create light from your being. It is meant to give the people reassurance so that when you arrive... The man's brightness flared to such a level that Izuku felt like closing his eyes, but didn't, as it seemed to captivate him. The man had sprouted wings much larger than Izuku's own had been, and his robe seemed to flutter. Both the villains know that they're in trouble, and the innocent know that they are safe. The brightness went away, revealing the simple man in grey clothes. Now, flare it. Izuku paused, concentrating and remembering the feeling of letting his chest swell as brightness once more filled the dark factory. Izuku's own wings sprouted as his eyes changed, but he did not gain the effects that the man had. "Put your back into it!" The man barked, face harsh, as he glared down at the newest beholder. "How are the people meant to look up to you when you do not elevate yourself?" "I never got your name," Izuku sheepishly said, the man's entire face moving in conjuncture with his glare. "Urayami, third beholder of One for All, and known as the divine hero, Retribuum." Izuku paused slightly at the first name, considering the man's quirk. "Nice to meet you, I already know who you are, boy." Izuku winced, efficiently cowed at the man's bark. "Now learn this. A user of One for All is meant to stand above the rest, to stand stronger, roar louder, be brighter." With the man's shout, he gained an entire ensemble of heavenly clothing comprising of both wings and robes, golden hood making him look like an ascended being in human flesh. "Your sheer presence should be enough to win a battle. With this power, you shall be the ultimate hero. You cannot appear as normal. You must be better." Izuku gulped at the man's sheer presence, the feeling of falling to a knee strong as the man stared down at him with impunity. Despite the fact there was only a few inches difference between them, he seemed impossibly taller. "Understood," Izuku got out. "Louder!" the man ordered, golden eyes peering into Izuku's very being as the boy gulped away his fears. "Understood!" Izuku raised his voice as his fists clenched. "Roar!" Izuku exploded in light at the command, floating a foot off the ground as his quirks worked in conjunction. Massive golden wings sprouted as well as translucent golden gauntlets, the boy's very soul resounding with the power. "Understood!" "Good!" Izuku gasped, shooting up in a cold sweat. His heart rate was a mile a minute as the boy felt his heart pound in his own head. The boy panted harshly as his head fell in his hands, the wool blanket pooling in his lap. "Well, that wasn't terrifying." Izuku's head shot up at the words, seeing Akamine sat across from him in a simple armchair with a large coffee mug in her hand. He looked around, recognizing their apartment. "Sorry, Rata-san," he murmured, peeling back the blanket to look at his foot and seeing ankle wrapped in white tape. "It's okay. Just startled me is all. Rumi, he's awake!" The woman called over her shoulder, and a quick thud, followed by a curse, sounded in the apartment. The pro emerged with a scowl. "Sup, kid?" the hero greeted, falling into the other armchair easily as Izuku swung his legs over the edge of the couch. "I fell unconscious, right?" Rumi gave a nod as Izuku paled. "What time is it?" "Just a bit past 6. Akamine answered, glancing at a clock on the wall. Izuku gave a breath of relief as he nodded. The teen threw off the blanket, blinking at the sight of sweats and a sweater. "I dressed you." "Thanks," he said simply, not really sure how to reply to something like that. "Thank you for your hospitality, but I need to go get ready for school." The boy stood, a bit shaky at first. "Nah, you can't drop a bombshell like you did yesterday, drool on my shoulder, make me carry you across town, then leave before I get any answers." Izuku promptly fell back onto the couch. "Bombshell?" Akamine questioned with a raised brow, sipping at her coffee. "I have multiple quirks." The woman paused entirely, staring at the boy. As though to prove his statement, the boy's eyes flared golden as gauntlets of golden light encompassed his lower arms. Akamine stared at the green-haired boy for several long moments before shaking her head as though to quell any disbelief. "Of course, continue. Silly me," she said simply, sipping at her drink. "The way my teacher explained it to me, It's a power accumulation quirk that grows stronger with each user. I'm the 9th user, and I am the first user who could use the quirks of the past users. And who were the past users? Rumi asked, leaning forward in her chair. I feel like I would know if I saw someone with some insane stockpiling quirk. I can't say, Izuku replied carefully, the woman huffing at the words. So clearly, it's someone quite high on the ladder, Akamine remarked. So, it's a power quirk, right? Like strength? Izuku stayed silent. Okay, that's a yes. The boy frowned, but didn't deny Rumi's words. Someone really strong? Akamine had choked on her coffee and both turned to her, the woman coughing as to clear her throat as she stared at the small boy sat on the couch. Izuku shrunk away from the look. Rumi, what does his quirk do? The quirk you know. The rabbit hero shrugged. Kinda just makes him faster and stronger, I guess. Hits like a truck every now and then. Akamine narrowed her eyes at Izuku. She opened her mouth. Please don't, the boy squeaked out. I'll have him come explain it to you, but he'll get super upset if I let other people find out. Akamine stared at him for several moments, while Rumi glanced between the two. Am I missing something? Yes, Akamine said simply. Fine. Thank you, Izuku said with an exhale. I really do need to get going, though. Sorry. Thanks again, Rumi-san. The boy gave her a thin smile that she returned with a frown. I got nothing out of this. She grunted, crossing her arms as she scowled at seemingly nothing. Izuku winced in regret as he paused in leaving. He stood behind her, seeming to want to say something. He sighed, hanging his head and leaving the apartment. Dating for a day, and your boyfriend's already depressed, Akamine remarked, sparing Rumi a glance over the rim of her mug as the woman glared at her friend before letting her head fall against the back of the chair with a sigh. This is why I go solo. That's the end of Chapter 4. I hope you enjoy the fanfic. Please leave a fanfiction of any kind in the comments that you would like to see in a video.